Thank you for listening to the Damage Report podcast, the show covering the true threats facing our country and what you can actually do about them. You can support this free podcast by leaving us a review and giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening to it. Every review helps more people discover the show at no cost to you. Welcome everyone to potentially the last Damage Report before the actual vote. Maybe we'll get one more. But Kavanaugh is coming up, so hold on to your butts. Things are developing fast. The FBI report has been concluded. There is just one copy of it somewhere, and they're looking at it. We'll be breaking down some of the smoke signals going up from the actual relevant votes. Many of them we know exactly how they're going to go, but there are a few that could go either way. Bernie Sanders, fresh off his victory over Jeff Bezos and Amazon, has got a new, even bigger plan and a lot more news, obviously. We're going to be dissecting the right-wing version of masculinity, or what passes for masculinity these days, which seems just a little bit whiny. We'll be breaking that down. And then I'm very excited to be joined by Greyson, who's going to be in studio talking about his most recent music video that he filmed amongst the Lakota. So we're going to be talking with him. It's going to be really exciting. Stick around. Until then, Jules is back.
Happy to be back.
Jules, who's still in LA.
For so briefly, I got 3 more days here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're very excited to have you while we still can. And if you end up coming back after you move.
Oh yeah, after I fail in New York and then come back here, which is really, really likely.
It happens, okay? So if you don't know, Jules is he's a man of many locales. He's been in San Francisco for a long time.
Yeah.
He's previously lived in LA, previously lived in New York.
Yep.
It's a big thing. And I associate with it because I started on the East Coast, lived in Texas for 5 or 6 years, and then eventually ended up here.
And this is your favorite?
Yes. Overall, yes.
Okay.
I think Austin is a really cool city. I will say that. If you've ever lived in Austin, ever have a chance to live in Austin, it is really cool. But there's so much news to get to. Why don't we jump into it? As I was saying, the Kavanaugh FBI investigation is done. Sorry, the FBI investigation is done. And they've produced their report, which the White House has already responded to. I say responded to, not read, because they didn't read it. They just responded to it. And Trump said that it was, there's no new evidence, there's no new corroboration. So he's still confident of Brett Kavanaugh, which is weird because I thought, after mocking a sexual assault survivor at a rally, the next day he would have an open mind to the evidence.
Yeah, I figured he might do a 180 and then just, believe Dr. Ford, but full of surprises.
Yes. Now, there are some significant problems with this investigation, or what passes for an investigation. The first and potentially largest is if it's about a sexual assault accusation and they don't interview the accuser or the accused, that seems a little bit weird. And that was not lost on the lawyers for Christine Blasey Ford. They put out a statement saying, an FBI supplemental background investigation that did not include an interview of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, nor the witnesses who corroborate her testimony, cannot be called an investigation. We're profoundly disappointed that after the tremendous sacrifice she made in coming forward, those directing the FBI investigation were not interested in seeking truth. And as of just a few minutes ago, news broke that they had sent a letter to the director of the FBI requesting that the FBI interview 8 potential witnesses in connection with the allegations made against Judge Kavanaugh. So no Ford, no Kavanaugh.
Well, I think, and then also the Republican response to this has been like, well, of course Democrats are saying it's not enough. They were always going to do that, which is so painfully dishonest because they didn't do enough prep for this, this investigation at all intentionally, and then are gaslighting us and being like, well, we knew you'd say there wasn't enough prep for this because that's how we made it happen.
Yeah, and look, if you're going to make that argument and say that we're just being disingenuous, and no matter who it was that you left out, we were going to say that the investigation wasn't enough, make it tough for us,
Yeah.
Don't have it be the 2 principal people in this story. That makes your case a little bit tougher. But of course, it goes beyond that. More than 40 people with potential information in the sexual misconduct allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh have not been contacted by the FBI, according to multiple sources. And there, what you have is, with Christine Blasey Ford, there's a number of people. I've seen between 8 and 20 that they say they want the FBI to talk to. The FBI is not going to talk to them. With Deborah Ramirez, she has multiple people willing to go on the record that have since gone public because the FBI won't talk to them, saying, no, we heard at the time about Brett Kavanaugh. It was very clear what happened. It was very clear that it was Brett Kavanaugh. We keep hearing no corroboration, no corroboration. You've got many people willing to go on the record to say that it happened at the time that it happened. They knew about it. And the FBI is either not interested or not able to actually talk to these people.
Well, and then there was also the story, I think, like 2 days ago that, friends of Kavanaugh had heard that Kavanaugh had been discussing and preparing for that allegation, that he already knew it was coming before it was made. Yeah, and so it's, I mean, we all know that this is a sham, that this is, we're being scammed into getting another Supreme Court justice whose only purpose is to say, oh yeah, you can't indict the president. You can't make the president respond to a subpoena. That's his only purpose. Because there are so many Republican judges who will happily overturn Roe versus Wade, who will happily give more money to billionaires when, if Citizens United comes up again. Like, it's just...
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
It's weird that we're never really addressing the main purpose of Kavanaugh, which is to protect Trump. And I feel like we lose that when we...
Yeah, I'm a little bit split. I definitely thought before the sexual assault that was the main reason. And I do think that for Trump himself, it's a big part of why he's pushing for him. I think, though, the new fervor amongst the right towards Kavanaugh, that, by the way, wasn't even really there before Christine Ford came forward, makes clear to me that for many people, if not for Trump, this is not about Brett Kavanaugh. This is about sticking their middle finger up at the Me Too movement.
Yeah, I think. Well, I agree. I think now that's definitely he's become like this figurehead of against the Me Too movement, the pro-Trump movement. Essentially, the I don't care about you, I've got mine section of like the white man population. And so, yeah, I totally agree that that's what it's become. But I think the Kavanaugh protecting Trump is still like very much like an active part of this that has sort of like fallen to the wayside.
Yeah, and I would be worried about that too, because he is seeming likely to get there. We'll be breaking down some of the evidence on that in a little bit. And if he gets there, he's going to be there for quite a while. But one other point that I want to make about this, I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I've been actually looking at what regular right-wingers on Twitter are saying about this sort of thing, seeing responses, because I've been tweeting a lot about this. This is the principal thing I've been tweeting about for literally weeks at this point. And they continually say that thing that now everybody just says. There's no evidence, there's no corroboration. Like, that has become such a glass shield. You think you're saying something, but you're not really. It's clear that there's no evidence that you're either interested in or that would actually convince you. But in this particular case, the thing that interests me about it is that it doesn't matter that she is saying that it happened. That counts as literally nothing. It doesn't matter that other people who knew her at the time say that they believe her. Same with Deborah Ramirez. And what it feels like, and I don't think this is really being stated very clear, is there are places in the world where women have far fewer rights than they do here. And it's codified in the law where their testimony is worth a fraction of what a man's is worth. And it's very clear that while that is not written into the law here, that is what we have. A woman saying something happened is worth nothing unless a man confirms it. in general, unless a right-wing man confirms
Yeah.
it literally means nothing that they say it happened to them. So when you see the stats and it's that false accusations of rape are like 1 to 2% or something like that, forget that. They're automatically presumed to be lying unless a right-wing man says that they're telling the truth.
Yeah. I mean, being accused of sexual assault or sexual impropriety is now being treated. The accusation itself is being treated as worse than the act itself, and the act itself is this is what was craziest to me about the initial reaction to the Kavanaugh allegations, which was that it was a combination of it didn't happen, and if it did,
it doesn't
youthful
matter.
indiscretion, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Which is, it's saying to every woman out there, hey, if something happened to you, if you were sexually assaulted, or if you've experienced sexual misconduct, and you want to come out about it, we're not going to believe you. We're going to attack you. We're going to uncover everything we possibly can to discredit you and ruin you, without really considering whether or not it may have happened, because that's the part that doesn't
Because
matter
we don't
to
care.
us. Yeah.
We'll mock you at rallies. Yeah, and a great demonstration of that is for all the times that the right wing has said that they've ruined Brett Kavanaugh's life.
Yeah.
This guy that he's so ruined that he might soon be on the Supreme Court. How many of these right wingers have said, oh, and by the way, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's life was apparently ruined too.
Yeah.
And all of these women who get sexually assaulted, their lives are ruined. Do you hear that? You don't hear that because of course they don't care about that. And it doesn't bother them. Even if it happened, they don't really care. I saw a poll, Republican men asked the question, would you still consider voting for a political candidate who you agree with on the issues, but is facing multiple accusations of sexual assault? 81% said yes. For Democratic men, I think it was 18%, which is still a little bit worrisome, but that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And Republican women, by the way, it wasn't a majority, but it was close to it. Far lower for Democratic women, of course.
They care about one thing, and that's power, and that's it. Everything else is irrelevant.
Yeah, and maybe lib tears.
I think it's part of power.
Yeah, maybe.
Making someone cry.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, this FBI investigation has apparently been wrapped up. Some of the senators who we're most interested in are now making kind of clear where they're gonna vote. We'll tell you about that when we come back from this. Welcome back to the Damage Report, everybody. I am John Idarola. Jules Suzdaltsev is in studio, and we're talking about Kavanaugh.
We are.
So the FBI investigation is wrapped up. The report is there, and all today, senators will be able to go in with some aides and take turns, very briefly, seeing the one copy of the report that is out. So we don't care about the vast majority of them, but there are a couple of senators that have indicated that maybe they will vote in a way that's not expected of them. Here's what they have been saying. Susan Collins this morning said that this appears to have been a, quote, very thorough investigation, which I thought was hilarious.
That's crazy.
She's great. She should have a show on Netflix. Just breaking down the news every week. As we've said, there's at least 40 people that they didn't interview that they should have. They didn't go to the supermarket to corroborate whether Mark Judges actually worked there. Lots of Deborah Ramirez's people, Christine Blasey Ford, Judge Kavanaugh, all of that. If this is a very thorough investigation, would like a non-thorough investigation just be like typing in Brett Kavanaugh on 4chan and seeing what comes up? I don't know what that would be.
Well, what is the difference between this, like an investigation, this, and not an investigation? I mean, it sounds like maybe they talked to Mark Judge.
They did apparently talk to Mark Judge, which is something.
But then what's to stop him from just being like, yeah, I don't remember, and that, which I mean,
maybe
obviously we haven't read the report, but it just feels like they obligatorily came to him, said, hey, what do you know? Nothing. All right, that's it, that's done. We're 4 days early. Beach week was longer than this investigation.
Exactly, yeah.
So I don't know what the difference is.
Let's talk about others. So Jeff Flake. He apparently, this is Frank Thorpe V said that Flake was leaving the briefing on the FBI's supplemental background investigation, saying he plans to go back and read more of the report, but says he saw, quote, no additional corroborating information. That might well be true. Yeah. By design, you fool. Obviously, that's what they wanted. They wanted to produce a report that has FBI on it, but none of sort of the substance of an investigation inside of it. And so our worry this entire time has been that Jeff Flake pushed for this to provide cover for himself, but he doesn't really care what's in it and will use it to justify his vote. Well, if that's what you thought, that's the direction that he seems to be going in.
Yeah.
And it is it's a queasy-inducing day when like the fate of the country rests on the shoulders of Jeff Flake. That's how I feel at this point.
Well, I think besides that, though, it's, we talk a lot about like all the, and I've said this before on the show, but we talk a lot about the Republican senators who are in the balance, Flake and what's the Murkowski. Yeah, I knew I was just going to get her name wrong, Murkowski. But I harp on this that there are Democratic senators in red states who still, after all this, might very well vote yes on Kavanaugh, which I think makes this whole argument sort of irrelevant.
Like Heitkamp or
Heitkamp or Manchin, Donnelly, who is I think on the fence again, but that shouldn't be the case. It still blows my mind that we're not like protesting outside of their offices to at least secure those votes.
Yeah.
In addition to trying to get Flake to flip.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at least in terms of all the, like, we've had Stop Kavanaugh and the phone number, which you can see there, 202-804-8191 to get in contact with your senator. We've had that up for like 3 weeks now. And a lot of that is like not just to put pressure on the Republicans, but some of the Democrats as well, especially Manchin. But you're right, there are others too. And imagine that, like we keep pointing out, they could have some other conservative. They could have some other conservative who's a diehard partisan, would get rid of Roe v. Wade, would probably protect the president as well, and has not been accused of sexually assaulting multiple people.
Yeah.
They could totally have that. So how weird it is that this is what they're pushing for. And by the way, if we could just zoom out slightly, Donald Trump said at a rally he said this on Twitter, but as a result of the rallies he's been having, wow, such enthusiasm and energy for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Now look, at large, that's not true. He's polling badly. More people want him to not be confirmed than to be confirmed. But I don't doubt that a lot of Trump supporters are excited about him. Polls apparently show that this has done more to make Republicans excited for the midterms than anything else. And how sick is that? That amongst all of the potential things that Republican voters could go to vote for, it's because they want to ensure that an accused sexual assaulter gets on the Supreme Court. Occasionally you're given just the perfect summation of a group, of a party, and what they stand for. And I think that this is a particularly dark one.
Well, again, I've said this a lot, but the Republican Party these last 2 years has been so on the nose, like evil and cruel, to a degree that's just terrible writing. Like the script for the last 2 years is embarrassing. It's from the like grab them by the tape to like trying to confirm a credibly accused judge of sexual assault. Like all of this is so unbelievable and frustrating, and it paints the perfect picture of like what the Republican Party has become, which I hate to say, compared to like the Bush years, which were terrible and embarrassing too, but like, oh my God, wouldn't it be great if that was what the Republican Party was? If that's what we were up against?
Yeah, like, not necessarily in policy, of course, but
but even in but you know what I mean? I almost mean it from every angle. Is that like this inherent cruelty, where like the policy is now led by cruelty rather than cruelty being a side effect of the policy.
Yeah, or them being willing to be cruel. This is an enthusiasm. Like it's like that old quote from the Star Wars movie, like raucous applause for the cruelty. He goes and he mocks someone who says she's been sexually assaulted, and his fans couldn't get enough of it.
They love it, yeah.
And then that's after the attack of the Gold Star families, attacking John McCain, saying I like POWs who weren't caught or whatever, which doesn't really make sense as a sentence. They want the cruelty. The cruelty is not like some side effect that they're willing to deal with. That is what they want, and they make clear on Twitter. Like we joke occasionally about the like the willingness to cut off their own arm to make the libs cry or something, but that does seem to be driving a lot of their political behavior and a lot of their political thought.
I mean, what's the 2020 slogan now? Like, keep America great. I feel like it could just be like, make the libs cry. That would be it, and he would win on that.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully not, but like he would still get,
His
more support.
Would love it. Yeah, that is certainly true. Okay, let's talk about something slightly more productive here. You might know Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna were pushing for that Stop Bezos Act, and now Amazon has drastically raised their minimum wage. There are some things to be worried about in there. They've apparently cut down on some sorts of bonuses and things like that, so all is not rosy necessarily, but it's a big win, and it's a win that came about because politicians like Bernie Sanders were willing to say, here are our demands, they're large, but you're gonna give them to us. And now he's got another one, actually. So he has a new plan to cap the size of financial institutions. Crazy, I know, with this whole too big to fail thing going around. But his bill would bar financial institutions from holding assets, derivatives, and other forms of borrowing worth more than 3% of the entire US economy. That would cap their size at $584 billion in today's dollars, which, by the way, just that seems like a lot.
Chump change.
But they're still not happy about it, of course. So what would this actually produce? Well, federal regulators would, if this was law, have to break up 6 different Wall Street firms, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley, as well as insurance giants like Prudential Financial and MetLife. Collectively, they hold more than $13 trillion in assets, which sounds like something from like a cyberpunk, futuristic novel. These mega corporations and their $13 trillion.
I get that. I might be wrong on this number, but is that not our literal GDP?
It might well be.
Like I think that's the U.S.'s entire GDP is being held by 6 banks. No, it's nonsense, yeah.
And bear in mind, again, to go back to what his legislation would allow, it would still allow them to be worth 3% of the US economy. One company in one sector of the economy could be worth 3%. But of course, it is receiving a lot of pushback. So we had a statement from the Financial Services Forum. This is a DC-based lobbying firm that says that the legislation to address so-called too big to fail banks risk ignoring the role these banks play in supporting the global economy. Bear in mind that lobbying group represents Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. So yes, of course, they're going to respond in that way. But the fear is that we had this situation where the recession began, the banks were considered too big to fail, and so we had to bail them out and throw fabulous amounts of money at them. They are way, way, way bigger than they were then. And the minimal regulations that we got in the wake of that recession have since been stripped away. Once Donald Trump and the Republicans took power, they got rid of those as well. So we're not just in as bad of a situation as we were on the eve of the last recession. We're in a far worse situation. And honestly, as of right now, the only person I see on either side of the aisle even talking about this is Bernie Sanders, with a plan that will immediately be attacked. In the same way that his Stop Bezos Act was condescendingly attacked right up until its success, and then the same people were saying, "Oh, we knew this all along."
Well, they didn't even. I mean, to not name names, many prominent Democrats didn't mention Bernie at all after the Bezos thing, but thanked Jeff Bezos personally for doing this, this great move. And about this banking bill, I've been reading through it, and my gut feeling is, while I love that we're addressing the idea of too big to fail banks, I don't think this would work because it feels like a stopgap to this much bigger problem with our economy where, our current economy, the monopoly of these banks, buying up smaller banks and becoming as big as they are, is like by design. It's encouraged by the system like that our economy works in, by I don't want to say all of capitalism, but it works because, or it's happened because that's what they're incentivized to do. And so bringing up the banks is a great idea, but it doesn't change the system that incentivizes them to do this and that also incentivizes the rest of the global economy to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would say, and I probably shouldn't speak for him, but I think he would say that this is not designed to fix the entire system. This is designed to stop us from having a second recession as bad as the first.
My gut feeling is that it would possibly help a little bit, but I still think even if we pass this, we'd still be heading headfirst into a horrifying recession.
Well, look, it might be that similar to the Stop Bezos Act, his goal might not be to get this literal word-for-word bill passed and put into law, but instead to make sure that the media actually pays attention to it and reiterates how big of a problem this actually is, as happened with Amazon. And so
that'd be great.
That's what we're doing right now, actually. You're welcome, Bernie. No. Anyway, hopefully other people will talk about it. It will probably be derided in the same way as Stop Bezos, but I guess the ball is in CNN and MSNBC's court. Okay, we're gonna take another break. When we come back, let's talk about masculinity, real masculinity, and what passes for it on the internet these days. Welcome back to the Damage Report, everybody. I am John Idarola. Jules is here too.
I am.
For just a short time, still.
Yeah.
A few more days, but maybe in the future. Let's turn now to, again, Kavanaugh. Not directly Kavanaugh, but as bad as Kavanaugh's been, as bad as Grassley and Lindsey Graham and their defense of him has been, and Donald Trump obviously has been horrible, others on the right in media have taken this as their opportunity to proclaim to the world, no, I'm just as bad.
Yeah.
Give me Patreon dollars and follow me on Twitter. And one of those is Ben Shapiro, who is now being brought onto Fox News regularly because he's sort of young, like he looks kind of young. He acts like the oldest man I've ever seen in my life, but he's younger than most of the people they have on that show. So he gets brought on to represent young right-wing thought.
Right.
And he had this to say about what he has learned from the experience of Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford.
Well, I mean, it's kind of shocking to suggest that due process shouldn't apply to men. I mean, that is the essence of sexism. The idea that certain rules should not apply to people on the basis of their genetics is that's obviously discrimination of the highest order. But this is the world in which we now live, in which white men are presumed guilty because they are white men, because they're supposedly in a position of privilege. I wasn't aware that Brett Kavanaugh forfeited his presumption of innocence or due process of law simply because of the color of his skin or the nature of his genetics.
So here's the thing that bothers me. It would be one thing if right-wing men like this were just continually whining constantly about how hard it is to be a straight white male. That would be sort of laughable.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time, they attack progressive men for daring to speak up for women and equality between genders, to speak up for all these other groups. They see that as not masculine. Instead, what masculinity is constantly complaining that people aren't being fair enough to you, and how hard it is to be straight, and how hard it is to be white, and how hard it is to be a male.
And how everyone else is a victim. That's their.
Well, everyone in that carefully selected group is a victim.
Well, what I'm
they
saying
speak
is
for no one but themselves.
They do that. Well, they complain about all these things, and then they say that, and also liberals are constant victims and need safe spaces, and they're snowflakes, and they can't handle the changing world, which is changing too fast for us. They do that a lot. And Ben Shapiro, by the way, is like, he's like the oldest young person ever. But
that's why they like him on Fox News. They want someone who thinks like a conservative who was born in 1950, but hasn't yet aged out of that demographic.
Well, his whole thing is that he is the perfect grandson for the racist grandpa. He is like parroting, and I say this from my own perspective, where my family also loves Ben Shapiro because he is that he just echoes these ideas that come from 80-year-olds who are really scared about the world. I genuinely don't believe Ben Shapiro and a lot of these right-wing personalities who definitely know better and didn't grow up in this insane racist world that like Ben Shapiro's our age. He grew up watching progress in a way that affects us in a positive way, but he found a way to make money by just saying the opposite to people who desperately need to believe that they're on the right side.
Yeah, and here's the thing, another thing. It would be one thing if Ben Shapiro went there and just spouted off these talking points and advanced this narrative or whatever, but it's that certain people are able to still have this aura of that this is the thinker on the right. This is the intellectual. This is a person who has logic. Facts don't care about your feelings or whatever. Okay, well, he's stating there that it's very difficult to be a white man. It's not fair. Did he present evidence? I mean, does he say, here are all of the ways that it's really hard to be? He doesn't have to do that because he goes on Fox News so that he can just make these proclamations and he knows that everyone watching it is going to agree with him.
Yeah,
and they say they love debate, but man, they sure love to be surrounded by people that agree implicitly with every single thing that they've ever said or ever believed. And again, the reason, I don't even like to put people like this on the show, but it's important too because they have a following. But again, the reputation of logic, intellectual, deep thinker. This is not just one of those crazy racists or whatever. He says they're supposedly in a position of privilege. If you at this point, and again, he's one of the young ones, still can't understand the concept of white privilege and deny it on its face, I don't care about any other thing that you say. You are obviously either too disingenuous to be trusted or too stupid to be trusted with complex arguments. It is the easiest thing in the world to imagine, but it's like with the NFL protests. It's you tell them what it's about and they say, no, I don't have a response to that. Here is what I say it's about, which I consider to be a thing that's easier to attack. And their idea of what white privilege supposedly represents is a great example of that. They say, well, I was never handed $1 million. Ben Shapiro wouldn't make that claim because, of course, the Koch brothers and other billionaires on the right wings have given him a ton of money. But others might say that, and that is frustrating.
Well, it's also part of their whole tactic is they throw out all of the, there's literally a name for it. I think it's called Gish Gallop, where you throw out 1,000 ideas that are all pretty wrong, but that take time to refute. So when somebody says, I oppose the NFL protest because it's against the troops, now you have to explain that no, it's not, and here's how it's not, and the time it takes to refute that is it puts you at a disadvantage, and that's their whole game plan. Is They don't have to say anything substantive. They just have to say something that's difficult to refute quickly.
Yeah,
and that's all he does.
And that's another reason that debate has become so worthless in the modern era. Because of tactics like that. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Greyson Chance and Tiny Decory are going to join us. We're going to be breaking down Greyson Chance's new video and his trip to learn amongst the Lakota as an absolute tragedy is striking that community. After this. Welcome back to the Damage Report, everybody. So one of the things that I enjoy the most about doing the show day to day is being exposed to and learning about a problem that I had not been aware of. And this is a fabulous opportunity for this right now, as I'm joined in studio by singer Greyson Chance and also Tiny Decory, founder of the Bear Project. We're here to talk about an artistic endeavor and the sort of social problem underlying it. So Greyson, you have a song, Good as Gold. You have a new music video. We're gonna talk a little bit about that. I wanna show you a section of the song before we get into the conversation.
Yeah, I know you hate this town. You're not the only one. I know you're hurting and you're feeling so. I know it hurts when you don't know where to go. And when you're tied up by the past you hold, you got to know that you are good as gold.
So Greyson, Tiny, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Glad to get a chance to talk to you. So you saw there that the music video, obviously unique. Tell us about the project. How did it come about?
Well, yeah, like I first said, thank you for having us, and I think I'm very excited to be here with Tiny. This has been a very long project in the making. I think conversations started around January, and I had not been aware, naively, I had not been aware of the Lakota or really of the reservation at all. And I had conversations with my friend Bobby Hannaford, who ended up directing the video for us. And we were talking a bit about the song. We had some other ideas, some treatments going along, but I would hop on the phone with him, and towards the tail end of our conversations, we would always end up talking about Pine Ridge. He had shot there a couple of years before, had a strong friendship with Tiny. And I think I just immediately felt this urge and this sense of wanting to go there, wanting to see it. And really experiencing it kind of on a deeper level. And so it's something that we talked about, and I think I was able to visit when we shot the video in May, and it was one of the best times I've ever had, and very proud to now see the video come to fruition.
So it was entirely shot at Pine Ridge?
It was, yes. So we shot on location at Pine Ridge, and I think something very important to mention is, even when Bobby and I were having our first discussions, there are a lot of statistics around Pine Ridge and around the Lakota, and a lot of unfortunate things that you'll read about. I think what people miss out on a lot of the times, though, is when you go and you see the spirit of the people there, of the Lakota. They're survivors in the truest sense. And when you're actually there on the ground and you're able to talk to these people, the statistics kind of float away, and then you recognize just, okay, these are people like all of us. There are some issues in this community and in this area, and they're fighting for their people. And I think that's something that gets missed out a lot of in mainstream media.
Yeah. And speaking of fighting for your people, Tiny, your work, I've been reading about your advocacy on one of the particular issues we want to talk about is suicide and youth suicide. And I had seen some statistics that were devastating.
Alarming.
And the most recent numbers I had actually seen was something like 2016, actually. So I'm curious both what your work day to day is like in terms of dealing with this issue, how things have been progressing over the past few years.
Well, we work 24/7, and I have an assistant. Her name is Eileen Janice, and we work hard. And 2016, and we're in 2018, but we're still experiencing a high turnover. We're experiencing attempts, and the good thing is that we're able to get to them in time before it becomes a completion.
Yeah.
So in our work in the Lakota language, bear is matho, and matho means good medicine. So the bear program, we'd like to think, brings good medicine to the people. But if you look at we live in poverty. Unemployment is about 89%. Alcohol rate is high, and our young people feel that there is no hope. But we're there to instill that hope into the young people and to strengthen the family circle. because we can't just take the child and work with the child and send them back into a home that's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
We have to bring the whole family and have the whole family buy into what we're trying to do. And so when, Greyson came with Bobby, and Bobby was there and did a video before a documentary, and it just opened the doors for us, because the young people that are in the video, they're survivors of life. Mm-hmm. Almost all of our young people are survivors of life. It could be survivors of divorce, and that devastates the child and it just tears everybody apart. Yeah. But a lot of them are survivors of life, suicide. They've been there, and they're able to walk in those shoes to say, I tried, I almost completed. Mm-hmm. But the work is there, and we work hard. We use our youth mentors that are in the BEAR program, and they continue to give us the uplift and the strength. I always say I got to look into the eyes of the child every day to stay focused, to see what our job is. Yeah. And so we get calls not just on the reservation, but in all other reservations around the United States. And we even get calls from non-Native programs. So we go into the schools and we take our young people into the schools, because suicide does not discriminate. Mm-hmm. Suicide said, we're just going to attack the Native American population. It's just sad that we're 5 times higher in the suicide rates. We were 4, but we're 5 times higher than the normal suicide rate.
That was probably one of the things I think in the beginning conversations too that struck me the most, and especially relating it back to the song as well is, I wrote this song a year ago, and I was in a particularly down point of my life, was just feeling some sort of things, going through some very human emotions, and I wrote this song actually for a couple friends who I noticed were going through a sort of similar thing, and I wrote it for us to say, find this inner spirit, you're good as gold, and all these sort of things. And so when I first was presented that statistic and thinking about kids my age, kids younger than me, going through this problem and it persisting in this community, that really made me want to go and figure out how I could help. And when you see Tiny and Eileen in action on the reservation, and even when we were shooting, they're getting phone calls constantly throughout the day, and Tiny's calling people all the time too, going, hey, how are you? Are you okay today? What's going on? Do we need anyone to come and check on you? And when you see that real human-to-human interaction, again too, you see this sense of community that's very, very inspiring and very admirable with the work that Tiny does.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about originally writing the song, for what you see around your friends. I've seen, obviously, the numbers are far lower than in this community, but I'd seen that over the past few years, the youth suicide rate nationally has been going up a little bit too, which is, we're a country of constant tragedies, unfortunately, but that's a particular one that just strikes you right at your core. I am curious, though, now you've got the song, trying to get people to think more about this, talk more about this. You talked about the documentary that was shot. Are there any, either state or federal, like any politicians? Is anyone working? Is anyone doing anything? Obviously, there's groups like you, but are people taking it seriously outside of the community?
I believe they're taking it seriously, but you have to understand, being on the reservation, we rely on a lot of federal grants. Mm-hmm. Our unemployment rate is 89%. You have 70% of the grandparents are raising their children. Mm-hmm. And within the tribe, we have to compete for federal grants with all the other Native programs in the United States. Mm-hmm. So they take it seriously, but I don't think they take it seriously enough. Yeah. I never want anybody to say, oh, that's just another suicide, because that child that had taken their lives is somebody's baby. So we need to put more pressure on the politicians on the outside, but it's getting tougher because of our president of the United States.
Yeah.
It's getting tough.
Yeah. Who has his own personal history of legal, all that.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've seen a few examples of other situations, like for instance in Flint, obviously. Mm-hmm. It can be very difficult to get the country at large to feel personally invested and have compassion for what's happening in a particular community. Obviously, we're all hurting, we all have problems and all that, but there are communities that have it worse. And so hopefully through things like documentaries and like your song, we can try to generate a little bit of that empathy. So hopefully you're successful.
And I think, and as well, I come from Oklahoma, it's where I'm born and raised, and I've done a lot of political work there as well. And I think, when you're in a situation right now where, you're seeing federal cuts, a lot of Native American programming getting cut right now, I think rather than trying to stay in that or focus and have a lot of negativity around that broader picture thing, maybe bringing in a bit more local, supporting groups like Tiny and Eileen, and also putting pressure on state lawmakers, politicians that are maybe a bit more accessible, where you can actually knock on the door and say, hey, here's a community that's right in your backyard that needs a lot of help, and what are you doing about it? Yeah. And that's a grander conversation for a lot of things in the country right now. But I think maybe bringing in a bit more inward, and because I personally think Tiny and Eileen they need to be supported in what they're doing because they're helping out this community so much.
Well, in the description of this video, when we post it to YouTube, we'll put information about the group as well. Greyson, Tiny, thank you so much for joining us. The song is good as gold. We showed you a short portion, but the music video is available that people can see. And so take a look and take the issue seriously. Obviously, very important. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
We're gonna take a short break. When we come back, just a little bit more news for you. So on yesterday's show, we showed you an ad about Medicare for All that was completely disingenuous, didn't seem to understand what the program is actually about. I want to do something more positive that will start off with a little bit negative. I don't generally like how a lot of Democrats run for office. I think that their ads are generally pretty ineffective, but we have a good one for you. This is coming from the DCCC. It has to do with the obviously earlier this year, the tax bill and messaging around that. Take a look.
Sir.
Yeah.
What happens when the average Joe out there realizes that we got like the entire Republican tax cut? I mean, we got like all of it.
Oh, come on. They got a tax cut, okay? Side table. How much was your tax cut?
It was not a lot, sir.
Yeah, but for someone like Side Table, not a lot is actually quite a bit.
That's true.
Right? I bet he saves enough each week to buy a latte at Starbucks, right?
Actually,
Shut up, Side Table. We are job creators. Okay? Remember that, okay? Coat rack. Did you see what's taking the lobster tail so long? You got it. Thank you.
Oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's pretty effective, I think.
Good. Yeah, that's a good one.
My favorite part is shut up, Side Table.
I hope that becomes a rallying cry. That'd be nice.
Yeah. So look, I'm not going to say that the Democrats don't generally face these tax bills and say, hey, it's going to the rich. That's true. Yeah. You keep saying that, and it only takes like 3 decades before people start to catch on a little bit, and multiple iterations of trillions of dollars being given to billionaires. But I think that's a pretty effective way.
I mean, I like
the obvious disdain. It's very much, it's got kind of in the background a little bit of a Trumpian vibe, they're laughing at you, which I don't, maybe we need to stress more. I
mean, I think trying to be funny about it's almost depressing that you have to be like funny about something that is like so cripplingly bad and obvious that, when they present it in such a cripplingly bad and obvious way, like that's the only time it actually like connects with voters. I mean, I really like the ad. I think it's hopefully effective.
Look, I spent, I don't know how many times before the last election breaking down the different proposed tax plans of the various Republicans. And like you keep showing the numbers and they're sheer insanity, but it doesn't always break through. Sometimes the stats aren't enough.
The like having to rely on entertainment is frustrating, but the other thing I wonder is like, who exactly is this speaking to? Is this, I don't see any Republican respond to this in any real way. They'll just assume this is BS. Could this genuinely convince like one Democrat out there who didn't vote to vote?
Maybe some independents?
Hopefully.
Maybe it'll help to depress a few Republicans and maybe they'll switch over, maybe they won't. I'm not sure.
I like ads like this, but I always like question, I wonder what does it take to actually convince people to vote? And I mean, I guess we'll see.
Okay. So we've decided it's trash. Okay, so moving on. The NRA recently tweeted something, and I'm more interested in sort of what's between the words. So here was the tweet. They said, when the government says you don't need an AR-15, that's when you need an AR-15. And I love that tweet because maybe I'm crazy, but that tweet to me is another in a long line of, hey, someday you might have to murder the government. And they just say that. Like, obviously, they're not saying it. They don't have the balls to actually say it. But whenever they talk about, like, we need to check the government, like watering the tree of liberty and all that stuff, what they're saying is, you need to get a gun because someday you might need to blow away some representative of the US government. And I just wish they would be more specific. Okay, maybe they're not saying you'll have to shoot a politician.
Yeah.
But which of the people the politician would send are you saying we have to blow away? Are you talking about Marines? You talking about the Army? You talking about the police? The FBI? Who of those people that you profess to support do you think your supporters should get ready to have to shoot?
I mean, anyone who stands in the way of, liberty would be, you have to pronounce like that, liberty.
They talk about, like, if they come to take your guns. Okay, so who specifically? Is it your local cop? If he comes to take your guns, you might have to kill him?
If Obama shows up to take your guns as promised.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by that dichotomy. We love the military, them damn libs don't support the military. We love them, and we will practice in the woods with our militia buddies in case we have to blow away the first regiment when they come in.
Well, I love this kind of argument and facetiously love it because it doesn't, the AR-15 angle can't be justified by like, oh, we want to, protect our homes, protect our families. Yeah, you can buy, a handgun for that, buy a shotgun for that.
Yeah.
The AR-15 is a militarized weapon, so they have to find a way to make it about the military.
Exactly. Okay, thank you, Jules.
Thank you.
Always great to have you in. Hopefully you'll be back on soon. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with much more for you. Thank you for listening to the Damage Report podcast, the show covering the true threats facing our country and what you can actually do about them. You can support this free podcast by leaving us a review and giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening to it. Every review helps more people discover the show at no cost to you. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.